All right, listen. Warzone is not a competitive esport. If you think so, you're wrong. I thought so for the longest time. I don't know, maybe it was a bias thing. Maybe it was me just never wanting to admit the truth, but I finally found the truth. Warzone is not competitive. Warzone is a casual BR that should be treated as a casual BR, and I'm going to break down why, and I'm sad about it. Thanks for being here. So when I say a casual BR and not a competitive esport, let's talk about what that actually means. Number one, there is a lot of money in this game. Obviously, there's a new tournament every other day for Warzone, right, chat? Like, you guys know that. The reason I'm saying it's not competitive, so I've been a part of a lot of tournaments recently, and what I'm realizing is that for probably the first time in any esport, at least any competitive esport that actually has some sort of a competitive culture, the players control the tournament scene. No one else does. It is 100% up to the players to decide what they want, what type of tournaments they're going to do. They can pick and choose, like, whatever they want to do, they can do. And in any sort of other competitive esport, that's not necessarily the case. And before we get into rule sets, before we get into all the different tournaments out there, the reason this is a confession by me is because I have literally said Warzone is... Wait, let me put this in quotes here so we have it written down. Gojj has said... I'm going to zoom in even more. Warzone is the next esport. I've said this multiple times, okay? I've said this a ton on this stream. And I've just realized this past weekend I'm just fooling myself. I'm just completely fooling myself. This is what I've realized. I said this a second ago. Players are in charge. The reason these players are able to be in charge of how tournaments are run, they're able to change rule sets on the fly, they're able to like dictate exactly how the event's being run and completely disregard for all of the people trying to run these events in the background, is because there's such a supply of events. The supply of the events exceeds the demand. Basic concept. Players are in charge. Why are they in charge? What I'm saying is the supply of the events exceeds the demand of the events. All right, so let's go to our graph now. Okay, number of events, number of viewers. Here's our lines. All right, equilibrium. What you need to know about equilibrium is basically just the idea of like wherever the two meet is where you're currently at. Okay, so here's our line of if number of events is if the number of events is the right side and number of viewers is over here, this is what it basically looks like. This is demand. All right, and then supply, we're gonna make this one red. Supply has been trying to look like this. The idea would be if we have an increasing number of events, we have an increasing number of viewers, right? It's a straight line because the idea here is that not when you increase events, your number of viewers is going up the same amount every single event. You're basically using a constant, okay? If there was no demand, if demand was infinite, all right? Every time you had more events, you would have more viewers, right? If demand was infinite, so if demand looks something like this, and demand just like infinite demand, right? Way up here, then you go all the way up to where supply meets demand. You're gonna have more and more viewers every single event that you put on, right? You have more events down here and more viewers up here. So if no demand is non-existent, you keep rising up supply until you find where you meet demand, aka the more events you have, the more viewers you have, because in theory, if it's a constant line, which right now it is, every event you put on nets a certain amount of viewers, and so every event you're increasing the number of viewers that are watching competitive Warzone, okay? However, here in this specific graph, we're looking at what actually demand looks like, because as there's a low number of events, right? A lower number of events, it decreases supply, or the supply of the actual tournaments has decreased, and so you meet where the demand hits. So if this is where demand line is, then this is the perfect number of events right here. Okay, right there. This is the perfect number of events. Right now, we're doing this many events. This is the difference. This is like perfect number if you're trying to maximize the amount of money you're using, maximize the amount of viewers, maximize the amount of events, and be perfectly in that equilibrium, like perfect spot. Hey, we're gonna like maximize all of our returns and not have any sort of diminishing returns. Diminishing returns meaning the more and more money or the more and more events you put on, the less and less return you're getting per event. This is like the perfect equilibrium event of like, hey, this is how much we want to actually be doing. This is where we're currently at, okay? Way up this supply line. So when you actually show where our viewers are at, they're actually lower, right? They're actually lower all the way down here based on this number of events. Boop. So it's where demand is at, is where the actual numbers of viewers are at, right? Because this is our number of viewers. So viewers over here, events over here. So if we have this many events on this red line of supply, you go down to the number of viewers, boom, demand. We are right here right now. The reason you see Twitch rivals, etc., have number of viewers here is because the number of Twitch rivals events is a different graph. It's a completely different, concept. They can drive views arbitrarily themselves, but regardless, this is one of the main reasons. So okay, we go to this, and I'm gonna come back to this in a second and be pretty clear about what I want to see the change being, right? You can't increase demand. It's very, very difficult to increase demand, to be honest with you, right? If we were to increase demand and draw a new line, and we were able to boost this up, purple's our new line, we're going to see more viewers, right? Because our new equilibrium is higher. So if we were to take a new line, boom, this is our new equilibrium. So we're now seeing an increase in viewers. And even down here, we'd still see an increase in viewers, right? But how do we increase demand in Warzone? It's basically impossible. It's been around for 2 years. I would say maybe you could get away with like the new map coming up theoretically could increase demand by like a little bit. So maybe it would look something like this. Like that's still an increase in demand. You're still going to see an increase in viewers at almost any level. Currently where it's at, you're not going to see too much of an increase of viewers, but at equilibrium, if you actually reduce the supply of events, you certainly could see a little bit of increase of viewers just because there's new content. But it's really difficult to increase demand for Warzone. Now, things that could actually increase demand on the on a real scale would be customization options in like a caster mode. Caster mode would maybe increase it up here, maybe because there's a more demand to actually watch Warzone events. Because again, number of viewers on the right side, number of events, and so as the events increase, there's always going to be a decrease of the amount of viewers that want to watch events because it's an oversaturation. So can we increase supply? Could we say, hey, if we were to increase supply, which would look something like this, would that in theory increase the amount of viewers? Yeah, look, going up the demand curve a little bit, it actually would increase the amount of viewers. But as you increase the actual supply of Warzone events, boom, up this way, on paper, you are increasing the amount of, on paper, right? You're increasing the amount of events happening. Therefore, the amount of viewers is technically going up because every single event brings a certain number of viewers. But if you're still putting on this same amount right here, it's not actually going to shift the number of viewers you have on that specific event, right? It's still the same line. As supply goes up, you're still trying to meet demand down here because this is how many events we're actually putting on. And so you're not actually going to increase your viewers at anything. So what you want to do is increase demand. And there's really, really difficult to increase the demand for Warzone tournaments. All right, there's our graph. Blah, 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 blah. Supply of the events exceeds the demand. We're not on equilibrium point. We want to get to equilibrium point to actually have more viewers per event. And what I'll say here to kind of make this easier to understand is that these equilibrium points, and we'll do purple for this. So this is where they meet on the line is viewers per event is like this equilibrium point, and then the actual number of events is down here. All right, so we have our graph. This is in kind of like in our brains in the background to provide context for this whole concept. Now, what I mean by players in charge, because there's so many events going on right now, the players of the actual events get to decide how the events are run at all levels. So let's say, for instance, you are a Random, let's do it Joe Schmo tourney org, or tourney organizer. Okay, this is our concept here. I'm Joe Schmo tournament organizer, right? And I have 5,000 to play around with, and I want to run a tournament. How do I create any sort of value out of a $5,000 tournament when all I'm doing is increasing supply? It's not going to increase the number of viewers I have. The only way to actually like artificially change where demand and supply meets is you basically want to you want to grab the biggest players you can possibly get and force their viewers to come over to your main broadcast, right? You want to take a Tommy, you want to take an Aiden, you want to take a Rated, you want to take a Huskers, and make sure they're in your tournament, right? So then you go hit up Tommy, Aiden, Huskers, right? Tommy, Aiden, Huskers. Boom. Now I've got my biggest tournament players, and I've got my event ready to rock and roll. Now I'm the one putting up $5,000, right? I'm putting up $5,000. I've got all the organizing behind the scenes. Maybe I'm adding in, let's just say it's like $600 of basic production. So $5,600 tournament. But I've got Tommy, Aiden, and Huskers. Well, I need them to play, because if they don't play, we're completely toast. Like, I am gone. If Tommy, Aiden, and Huskers don't play, let's say they're the three biggest players in the tournament, and they're the only three big players in the tournament. Everybody else is a small streamer. If they decide not to play, I have no event in terms of any sort of return on investment, right? So I've got to cater to them as much as I possibly can. So for instance, let's say, and I'm not saying this has happened recently, but let's say for some reason, Huskers gets, let's say he lags out, it's customs, lags out of game 1. As a tournament organizer, what do? Do you play on? If Huskers lags out of game 1 and he's the only one that lags out of game 1? Or do you say, maybe we reset? Because Huskers isn't playing map 1. And if he doesn't play map 1, then he's going to be unhappy. If he's really unhappy and something bad happens in map 2, maybe he quits the tournament halfway through and we're toast, right? You have to keep the big ones in there or you're going to be completely shafted. So you reset. It's frustrating. That's what organizers have to think about as they're doing this. We go back, all right? Maybe they don't. Maybe he doesn't back out. So here's the thing. This is when I'm saying players are completely in control of tournaments. Whatever they say. So if Aiden hits up the organizer and says, hey, you need to include these rules. What are you going to do as a tournament organizer? Probably include those rules. If Tommy says, hey, this needs to be a different format, you are probably going to change formats. Right? This is the issue with tournaments today, is that players are entirely in control of their own tournaments because there's so much of supply of tournaments that for a $5,000 tourney, these guys play in $5,000 tournaments every single day. So when this tournament comes out, they see the format, they see the rule set, they're like, I don't really want to play in that rule set, because honestly, it probably is a bad rule set. They are dictating the way the tournaments are played. And does this sound like a problem at first? Not necessarily, because you're like, well, they're theoretically making the tournament a better value. But the problem is no other esport can ever function this way, and no esport just in general can ever function this way. Ever. It doesn't work like that. If a tournament organizer's putting on an event out of their own pocket or out of their own sponsorships or whatever and says, hey, I have $10,000 to quote unquote give away in prize pools to all these tournament players, and the tournament players say, no, you're doing this wrong, you need to change this, you need to change this, you need to do this, you need to do this, regardless of whether they're right or not, that's not how esports works. We're not dictating rule sets on the fly. They might be how Warzone's working right now, and maybe that's okay. But this is not how esports works. So this is why I'm going back to the very beginning and I'm saying Warzone is not an esport. Warzone is a competitive Wild West. That's what it is. It's a competitive Wild West where players are dictating how tournaments are run to be able to provide the best possible content or best possible tournament for the players. No one else. Because they can afford to do that. If I was a player, I'd be doing the same thing. I don't want to go play in a 30-hour tournament or even a 5-hour custom tournament where I have to wait an hour between each games. And I agree. We've talked about this multiple times. What is the standard rule set? Could all the players get together and create a standard rule set? Like, here, I'll put this in here, like standard rule set. I think we've even brainstormed on stream how to do this. But what I've realized is that this doesn't even matter. A standard rule set has no bearing on anything because people are going to complain about it regardless. Standard rule set doesn't matter because people are going to complain about it. They want to change it and they want to keep going. And ultimately, if you're not running a specific rule set that players want you to run, they will just leave the tournament because there's 1,000 other events they could be running probably at the exact same time. So this is where I'm going to all this is, of course, yes, it's not an esport, but the biggest issue behind all of it is that because there's so much supply and sponsors can't get any ROI and they're determined on getting any sort of like perceived ROI on the event for these big streamers being in the events, the players can dictate how the events are run. They can dictate what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. And if tourney organizers want any longevity in the tourney space, they cannot piss off any large creators or tourney organizers. Oh wait, sorry. Any large creators or competitors. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. This is the other thing. Because let's say I'm a tournament organizer and I'm really sticking to my guns, right? If I'm like, boom, all right, look, this is the rule set. These are the commands. This is the title. If you don't do these things, we ban you from the tournament. We boot you. You're kicked. It's over. Game, set, match. This is what we should do. This is how all tournaments work. If you don't follow the rules, you are banned. That's how every other tournament format works. Like, what are we talking about, right? You might have some sort of like, you know, some sort of 3-strike your rule out. You might have some other thing, but like, think about any other sport. Think about any other esport. If you are legitimately not following the rules by any means, like I'm trying to even think of a good example. Like, let's talk about like CDL. You can't load into the CDL match with the wrong weapon. Like, you can't load into the CDL match with an MP5. You can't go into, like, League of Legends, like, pro circuit with some sort of banned legend. Like, that's just not how that works. You see what I'm saying? Like, if you don't follow the rule sets, you're going to be kicked or banned from the event. But in Warzone, we don't have that luxury. If competitors, you know, drop in with wrong weapons, right now, our only ruling is that we give them a 0 and keep playing because you need them for viewership. If competitors don't put commands for the organizer, right now, no punishment. Like, there's nothing holding players accountable, and so there's no reason for players to even be accountable. And if they don't want to do something that the rule set says, or if they don't want to put in commands, or they don't want to put the correct title, and they don't want to promote the brand or the org or the sponsor that's putting it on, not only is that brand, org, and sponsor not going to be running more tournaments in the future, but the player just doesn't really care because there's so many other events happening. The tournament organizer needing players is an imbalance. Players should want or need tournament organizers to put on events. Players should want to please tournament organizers. And it's completely reversal. Tournament organizers are going far out of their way to please some of these bigger, or even medium-sized names, because it is completely indicative of their success going forward. So yeah, there's no way to fix this. It's going to continue being this way because people see, you know, Warzone as this kind of Wild West of like advertiser, like not revenue, but advertiser like promotion value that isn't actually there. And it's, you know, misconceived, but there you go. So anyways, thank you guys for listening to random economics talk that I did a pretty poor job in terms of using my graph because I was not expecting to use it, but I still had fun. I appreciate you guys a ton. Thank you guys for listening. But yeah, so I've changed my mind. Warzone not a competitive esport. Tournament organizers have zero control. Players are in complete control, which is not how it's supposed to be. There's no real punishments that are being dished out for... I mean, if the only way to actually gain viewers for main broadcast is pull from players themselves, and players aren't even giving those organizers a right to pull viewers over to be able to showcase some sort of statistical data that they have some success on their event, then what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, there's no common decency back and forth. There's no like gel back and forth between players and organizers. So there's basically no winning for events. All events are going to be losing events, but it doesn't matter in terms of the competitive landscape because there's so many different events. So as one falls off and doesn't work, another one's going to come up into its place and try.